everybody, this is Russ Miller and I want to welcome you to the Commandments of R&B Drumming video series. We're going to take this 3-volume series and look at R&B music and R&B drumming from a historical standpoint, from an instructional standpoint on the drums themselves, and also talk about some of the attributes and aspects of just R&B music in general. I'm a great fan of R&B music and have had the pleasure of working with several R&B artists myself, but I want to introduce you guys to a real freak about this genre of music. His name's Zoro, and he's one of the most respected drummers in R&B. Had the pleasure of working with some great artists in the 80s and 90s like The New Edition, Bobby Brown, Jody Watley, Lenny Kravitz, all the way up through legends of music like Frankie Valli. He's one of my best friends, but besides that, he's probably the most knowledgeable guy that I know on this subject. Owns about 3,000 CDs and is really pumped up and excited about R&B music and R&B drumming.
What's going on, Russ? What's happening, baby?
So man, R&B music. Let's talk about it. R&B drumming.
Well, R&B music is my passion. Thank you for that eloquent introduction.
Hey,
I've been living this music most of my life. I grew up in an area in South Central Los Angeles where I grew up listening to R&B music. So I've listened to it all my life, and I've played it professionally for the last 20 years. I get excited when I think about it. That music is all about passion. The number one most important thing to understand about R&B is that it's all about the heart. And all my favorite drummers and artists are all about heart, feel, and emotion. Everything else would be secondary to that. It's got to have passion. If it doesn't, it means nothing. soul music's original popularity was from about the late 1950s right on through the 70s. To understand where soul music comes from, you have to understand a little bit about the artists, the soul pioneers. Most of the soul pioneers grew up in the churches. They were gospel singers, and gospel music is probably one of the biggest influences on soul music that there is. Next to the gospel era being important would be the blues era, and there were all kinds of different blues groups and influences and sounds. There was the jump blues, there was the Chicago blues, there was the Delta blues, the Memphis blues, and all those had a major influence on all the soul artists as well as during the 40s, the early 40s right through the mid-50s, doo-wop was a huge influence. There were all kinds of doo-wop groups. There was hundreds of different vocal groups that from Harlem, New York, all the way to California, 5, 6 different singers singing beautiful harmonies. That worked its way into it as well as the influences of jazz and even a little bit of country. But one of the main early R&B pioneers and predecessors that laid the foundation for what would really be called R&B was Louis Jordan and the Timpani Five. Louis was the king of the jump blues, and his group had a drummer named Chris Colombo, and they were very influential, and he had a lot of hits. Then there were people like Hank Ballard and the Midnighters, and there was Little Willie John, and then you had the godfather, or the spiritual father of soul, they call him, Ray Charles. Ray Charles was one of the first artists to fuse gospel with jazz and rhythm and blues in a pop setting.
All right, Z, let's talk about soul drumming and some of the attributes of playing this on the kit.
Sure. Well, you got to understand where the soul drummers came from stylistically. I mean, soul, the era of soul, those drummers came from previous eras. The great soul drummers were basically blues drummers. Some of them bebop drummers, big band drummers, New Orleans drummers, many of them gospel drumming. So all those influences made them soul drummers. Soul wasn't just a particular style of its own, it was influenced by all those others. And one of the main things about that I've studied in guys from that era is that they played with a wide dynamic range. I mean, these guys could play very, very quiet. There were times when they just wailed. I mean, they slammed real hard. But they also had the ability to play extremely quiet and extremely soft, which I think is kind of almost a lost art. Everybody seems to play super loud at one volume today.
But you know what? What's the interesting thing is people forget that, on all those recordings, a lot of that stuff, there was one microphone.
Right.
And they would put like the lead vocalist closer to the mic, and then the background vocals would be just a little bit farther away, and the drums would be in the back. And you had to play light.
Right.
And that's where a lot of that stuff stemmed out of. And now a lot of guys just slam all the time. There's no dynamic interplay.
Yeah, and that's, to me, that's what's missing. When you play soul music, you have to take in consideration the dynamics. These guys had a lot of ghost notes. A lot of the ghost note work was great. A lot of texture on the ride cymbal and the hi-hat, because if you think about it, 95% of what an R&B drummer does is keep time. So what does he do it on? He does it on the hi-hat, and he does it on the ride cymbal. And they had incredible, ride work and hi-hat work, and also there's a swing factor to all of their playing, because they came from the earlier styles, which was swing and bebop, that even when they're playing different styles and types of soul music, it still swung, so they had that swing thing happening. Not every beat, not every style, but they had that in their playing. So they had touch, and they had sensitivity. And those would be what I would consider the main attributes of soul drumming.
Okay, let's talk about some of the gospel grooves. I know I get asked to play several different kinds. So like the Fifth Dimension gig, I play several different kinds of gospel grooves, like a cut time thing with a cross stick, a train groove, various things. Let's give some examples.
All right, so we'll do the train groove, which is heard in countless different types of gospel. Also, like you've heard it like in those old 50s tunes by the Coasters, the Yakety Yaks, all those kinds of songs. They use this basic 2-beat thing, and here it is. Then you got the 2-beat cross stick thing, which you were talking about. A lot of times it's at a little bit of a faster tempo, so it'll go something like this.
Right, so and I noticed that definitely the hat swings.
Yeah.
And the kick drum pattern swings a little bit, even when you're playing like the straight 16th notes on the snare for the train thing. And the other thing, definitely the kick drum is the instrument with the interplay, the improvisation, you know, the really solid hat, snare, especially 2 and 4 is real solid, right?
Right.
And then I know that the ride cymbal is also like, you know, a lot of interplay and improvisation on the ride cymbal, while the rest of everything else is kind of real solid.
Yeah, I mean, my approach is I like to, even on the two-beat train thing, is I like to play with the bass drum a lot, do a lot of syncopated rhythms, a lot of swung type of rhythms against the straight thing there. And, you know, according to the music, most of the times you keep it straight, but then you could do some little playing with it. So that might, if I wanted to syncopate it up a little bit more, which I like that, it'll go something like this. Some of the most influential gospel artists include people like Mahalia Jackson, the Soul Stirrers, which featured Sam Cooke. He came from that group. The Dixie Hummingbirds, they sang with Paul Simon on his song, She Loves Me Like a Rock. Many great gospel artists, and a lot of them are available on one box set from Rhino called The Gospel Box, Testify. A great example of a gospel groove is this next tune, which is a classic, called Old Landmark by Aretha Franklin. It's from her 1972 album called Amazing Grace, which features Bernard Purdy on drums. One of America's greatest exports is blues. The blues comes to us from the southern region of the United States. Many of the blues artists were from there originally and moved up to the northern parts in the 1930s and 40s. A lot of them ended up in Chicago, and they ended up recording for Chess Records. One of the most important blues drummers is a drummer by the name of Fred Below. He played with many of those recording artists on Chess, people like Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Willie Dixon, Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, John Lee Hooker, and most of the other Chess recording artists. He was one of the first electric blues drummers because prior to that, most of these people played guitar and other instruments by themselves, and most of the blues didn't feature drums. So he's a major pioneer in the scene.
All right, Z, blues music and blues drumming.
Yes, Russ.
Basically, when we think of blues, we think of like shuffles. Although, all blues, are not always shuffles, but
Right.
basically we think about the shuffle grooves. And shuffles, one of the hardest grooves to play. I know for me, in later learning years, it was like to get the pocket together on a shuffle was difficult.
Yeah, shuffles are like, to me, after you're done doing all your big bang drum solo stuff and your single stroke rolls around the toms and your triplets and your crossovers, the first thing usually somebody wants to know is, okay, can the boy play a shuffle? Can he shuffle? Because that's like the barometer that musicians use. Not other drummers, but musicians always, you sit in on a gig and the second you hit a shuffle, they go, okay, that's tired. It's not happening.
Right.
You know what I mean? So the shuffle has always, to me, been the barometer of whether a drummer was a good drummer or not. And there are literally, there's hundreds of different types of shuffles. And shuffles come out of the 12/8 groove, which comes from Africa. But there's all kinds of different shuffles based on different regions of the country. There was, Kansas City shuffles, Chicago shuffles, lots of different styles of shuffles, Motown shuffles, halftime shuffles. So there's a great variety of them, and they're basically a study in and of itself. I mean, you could pretty much just concentrate on shuffles for a long time and still not have mastered it. And the great rhythm and blues drummers can play shuffles great.
Right.
That's a prerequisite for all of them. You've got to be able to shuffle. Now for another famous lick from the House of Z. The first one I want to share with you is what I like to practice over a shuffle. It's going to have the exercise has the left foot playing the third partial of the triplet on every beat. So it goes a little something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And it's one of my favorites. This is my favorite shuffle exercise, where it's a unison exercise. Both hands are playing the same thing, a shuffle pattern, but the left hand kind of accents beats 2 and 4, and it can do other accents, but they're both playing a shuffle. Then I play different syncopated rhythms with the right foot to work the independence against it. So that might go something like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
All right, Z, let's talk about like a seriously difficult groove, which is the quasi-swung shuffle, like the half-swung shuffle groove. And it's not quite straight eighth notes, it's not quite a full shuffle or triplet-oriented groove, it's somewhere in between. And it's a bear to play, that's for sure. I know that for me it just came from like listening a lot and playing along with some records that had those grooves.
Right.
What do you think? What's the approach?
Well, first of all, the tune we're talking about that would exemplify this is Think by James Brown. Drummer Nate Kendrick was the original drummer on it, one of the early great James Brown drummers. He had a great shuffle feel that was in between what you just said, straight eighth and swung, and it was a certain way he approached the hi-hat. I'll play the groove Think from the record, and then I'll show you the 2 different places that it could fall towards, and then I'll get back to the one that it should be. So it goes a little something like this. Okay, so that's the original groove. Now I can move that closer to an eighth note feel and straighten the hi-hat out even more, which is more like a 50s rock type of a beat. Or I could shuffle it all the way, the whole entire shuffle. it's not that either. It's in between. So here it is again. To me, it's the funnest groove to play. I love that in-between feeling, and it feels great. And it's one of the hardest shuffles to master, and you don't hear it very much today. You don't hear that. It's kind of almost like a lost shuffle.
Right. That sort of influenced some of the hip hop things that are happening today. But
sure,
it's a bear to play. That's for sure. I can see some of the attributes of it where like the hat is a little straighter and the snare figure swing
a little swing more, yeah.
It kind of just moves around and it just lies in that middle space. And
and the other thing, for me, I use my fingers a lot to play that groove. And that's kind of an attribute also of a lot of those early soul and blues and gospel drummers. They had real good finger control. They weren't all like up here like this, and they weren't all just wrist. They had wrist and strong wrist, but they had a lot of finger control for some of that faster shuffle type of stuff. Yeah, the shuffle. We like them. One of the big influences on soul was the New Orleans sound, and it had influences there from Europe, West Africa, Africa, the Caribbean, and that was responsible for the sound that influenced the rest of the world. People like Professor Longhair, he was one of the early pioneers. He was the boogie-woogie piano guy, basically invented rock and roll. Then you had Memphis, and Memphis has always been a big town with music. There was the Stax Volt record label from Memphis, and they had their own unique sound that was sort of country, soul, and blues. And from them came Booker T and the MGs, which featured Al Jackson Jr. on drums. Booker T and the MGs was the house rhythm section for the Stax Volt label. They played on countless hits by people like Otis Redding. They're almost on all the records. Otis Redding, Carla Thomas, Sam and Dave, the Marquis, Rufus Thomas. Just about everything they did was from them. Then you had Detroit, which was the Motown sound. Marvin Gaye, Gladys Knight and the Pips, Diana Ross, the Jackson 5, just everything that Motown did. Then you had Chicago. They were known as the capital of the blues, the Windy City. That was the home of the legendary Chess Records. They had people in Chicago like Curtis Mayfield and the Impressions. Jerry Butler was from there. Jackie Wilson was from there. Then you had your Philadelphia soul sound, which started in the early 70s, known as the Philly Soul. That was the Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff label. And they had a house band called the MFSB Band, which was sort of like the Motown in-house band, or like Booker T and the MGs. And they played on tunes by the Spinners, the OJs, Teddy Pendergrass, Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, and just about everything that came out of there. Then you had New York City, the Big Apple, home of the world-famous Apollo Theater, where the careers of many of the great soul and funk performers were launched. New York was also home of the massively influential Atlantic Records, founded in 1947 by Ahmet Ertegun. Now, Atlantic is one of the biggest and most important labels of rhythm and blues of all time, from about 1947 through about the mid-70s. They were responsible for great artists like Ray Charles, Aretha Franklin, Ruth Brown, Big Joe Turner, Laverne Baker, the Drifters, the Coasters, Solomon Burke, Roberta Flack, King Curtis, Donny Hathaway, and countless others. And part of their sound was hiring New York session musicians, people like Bernard Purdy, people like Panama Francis. These drummers played on lots of records by those people. Then also, Jerry Wexler took down a lot of his artists like Aretha Franklin and Wilson Pickett. He took them down to Muscle Shoals, Alabama, where there was a great recording studio down there and a great group of session guys known as the Muscle Shoals team. And that was Roger Hawkins, the drummer, and he played on a lot of great songs by Aretha Franklin, Percy Sledge, the Staple Singers, and they were responsible for a huge sound in soul music too.
New Orleans.
Yes, my favorite part of the country.
I love it. I love New Orleans.
For food and for music.
Yeah, for sure. Anyway, I love New Orleans music. I know you do, and
love it.
Great drummers, man. Great playing, and a lot of stuff's come out of there.
Yeah, that's
jazz, blues.
Some of the best drumming we have comes from New Orleans.
One of the things I think jumps out the most is probably some of the march stuff, like the second line grooves. And second line, everybody says second line drumming, but that's kind of comes from the funerals, right? New Orleans funerals, where the drums and the band were second in line behind the family in the funerals. They used to play the marches on the street and things. That's where it's got its name. But that, I love that style of drumming. It's a real loose. It's got some of these feels we've been talking about. Some of the half swung things are in there. A lot of it's you can see all these influences. You know, the gospel thing came from that with the snare drum. I mean, all that kind of stuff. So. Great drumming, great playing. Let's talk a little bit about some of the attributes of playing that.
First of all, New Orleans music is fun. Forget about all the educational stuff. Forget about everything. All those drummers are having a good time.
Right.
And they might not know, some of them, you know, they're just, their stuff's even sloppy, but that's the beauty of it. It just feels good. New Orleans people and music and everything about them is colorful. It's very colorful. They're very animated people. There's influences from all over the world in New Orleans. So when I think about the New Orleans drummers, I think about the looseness, the sloppiness, the way they use a snare drum. For instance, I mean, they hit all sorts of different surfaces. I mean, there's that sound. There's that rim shot. Then they use the side stick sound. New Orleans, known as the Crescent City, was the birthplace of such innovative styles of music as jazz, early rhythm and blues, and rock and roll. They also gave us the second line parade beats, ragtime, and Dixieland. The New Orleans funk became a culmination of gospel, calypso, blues, jazz, and rock and roll. One of the preeminent drummers of the New Orleans sound was Earl Palmer. He's one of the most recorded drummers of all time. His work with such artists as Little Richard and Fats Domino and Professor Longhair is influential in much of popular music. He played on Rip It Up by Little Richard and I'm Walking by Fats Domino and countless other hits. He also influenced the younger generation of New Orleans drummers such as Joseph Zigaboo Modaliste, who was the drummer with the Meters, Dr. John, the Neville Brothers, and he's considered one of the funkiest drummers of all time.
All right, Z, Detroit, man, the Motor City.
Yeah.
A lot of
Motown.
music.
Home of Motown records.
Definitely. Barry Gordy, a lot of music coming out of there. One of my favorite styles for sure. Great tunes, great instrumentalists, great singers, horns, strings, I mean everything. Great arranging,
Yeah.
great grooves, and a lot of great parts that those guys played. And very interesting, some of those beats, a lot of interesting beats. I know you have a great affinity for Motown music, and especially the players who played them.
Yeah, man, if it weren't for Motown, I probably wouldn't be a drummer. Motown, and probably a lot of other drummers feel that way. Motown was like, it was it. That was the music of the 60s that influenced me as a kid. When I first heard Edwin Starr's tune, 25 Miles High, it had this ridiculously funky beat. I mean, this thing was like, what the heck is that? You know what I mean? That was like, it made my head turn. I was like, it was the beat. And they had a lot of significant beats. But yeah, if it weren't for Motown, I probably wouldn't be a drummer, because I think it was some of the beats in the Motown music that attracted me to drums. And there was a charm in the way those records were recorded. And it took me about 20 years to find out about how a lot of that stuff was done, until I interviewed a couple of the living Motown legends for the book and for the Modern Drummer feature that I did on them. And I learned a tremendous amount of stuff that I didn't know for all those years, and a lot of other people didn't know. But they are probably some of the most influential musicians on the planet. And
I know a lot of that stuff was recorded with multiple drummers too.
yeah, some of the tunes had, which we didn't know until we interviewed them, some of them had 2 or 3 drummers on there at the same time. But one thing I really learned that was significant was about the fills, that certain fills, each guy would do a different fill.
Right.
Benny Benjamin would have a certain fill, Pistol Allen would have a certain fill, and Uriel Jones, and you could tell the identity of who was doing the fill by it. I'll give you an example. This is the classic Benny Benjamin fill that has graced 1,000 hit records. Play it again on the low tom. I know you wanna leave me. I mean, who hasn't heard that fill? That's
Right.
the Big Chill. If you've ever seen the Big Chill, you know that song. Then Pistol had a fill that he did, and this was just, and the way they explained it is only they did these kind of fills because they couldn't think of the other guy's fill. So Pistol's fill started in a lot of tunes was boom, kaka boom. So anytime you hear, that was Pistol. Then Uriel, he always started his fill on beat 3, and you heard this on the main tunes. And you heard that at the beginning of the, yeah, exactly. Da 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 da. I mean, it starts off 100 different songs. That's also the one that started off like I think the 25 Miles High. So these fills are classic. And I remember Ed Green telling me that, and he's a great studio drummer of the 70s, about how he transcribed those guys and those fills, and on one of the Steely Dan songs, he played, like he said, about 89 times on the Steely Dan song called I Got the News. He said, yeah, we counted that at the end of the session. 89 times I played. It's a great fill. You know, and Motown, they set the precedent for those kinds of pop, you know, funk R&B fills. And I love that music. It's like I said, the reason why I'm a drummer. Motown, baby! Detroit, known as the Motor City, brought us Motown records. It was dubbed the Sound of Young America and was founded by Barry Gordy and his sister Anna in 1960. Motown became the most successful African-American label in music history, and it brought us a plethora of humongous R&B soul stars and icons, people like Stevie Wonder, The Temptations, Marvin Gaye, The Four Tops, Edwin Starr, Mary Wells. But more importantly, it featured 3 brilliant drummers. Benny Benjamin was the first. Then there was Pistol Allen. Then Uriel Jones. They're on more hits, the 3 of them, than any other sect or group of drummers on the planet. And Motown was the most influential soul record label of all time. Pistol was known for his shuffle, and Uriel was known with his more laid-back funk groove. Benny was known for his adventurous drumming in every style.
You taken away all my reason for living. When you pushed aside all the love I've been given. Now wait a minute, didn't I treat you right now, baby? Didn't I? And didn't I do the best I could? Now didn't I? So don't you leave me standing in the shadows of love. I'm getting ready for the heartache to come. Don't you see me standing in the shadows of love? Try my best to get ready for the heartache to come. All alone, my destiny, with misery, my only company. May come today, and it might come tomorrow, but it's for sure I ain't got nothing but sorrow. Now don't joke, I just talk about you. How can you watch me cry after all I've done for you? Now hold on a minute, gave you all the love I had, now didn't I? When you needed me, I was always there, now wasn't I? So don't you leave me standing in the shadows of love. I'm getting ready for the heartache to come. Don't you see me standing in the shadows of love? Try my best to get ready for the heartache to come. All alone, my destiny, with misery, my only company. Might come today, and it might come tomorrow, but for sure I ain't got nothing but sorrow. Now don't joke, I just talk about you late at night. How can you watch me cry after all I've done for you? Hold on a minute. Gave you all the love I had, now didn't I? When you needed me, I was always there, now wasn't I? What did I say to make you wanna leave? Now wait a minute. Gave my heart and soul to you, now didn't I? And didn't I always treat you good, now didn't I? So don't you leave me standing in the shadows of love. Try my best to get ready for the heartache to come. Can't you see me standing in the shadows of love? Try my best to get ready for the heartache to come. Don't you leave me standing in the shadows of love. Try my best to get ready for the heartache to come. Can't you see me standing in the shadows of love? I'm getting ready for the heartache.
Sweet soul music. Did you have a good time? Because I certainly did. Soul music is all about feel and heart and having a good time. I had a great time. I'd like to thank you for watching. Russ, did you have a good time?
I'm into it, man.
Did you have a good time?
Yeah. The next volume, the funk volume, and the hip hop volume after that, we're going to take a look at some of the artists that were influenced by the people we talked about here and go right up to today and tomorrow with R&B drumming and R&B music. So we're going to have a great time. Look forward to see you in episode 2.
See you in episode 2. Thanks for watching.
See you, man.
Over and out. Let the funk begin! I'm ready too.
Brother Z.
My funky tis a feet, sweet land of groovy me, of the funky land where my brothers groove, land where the beat does not move. From every grooving side, let funkdom ring.